Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you 50 tips on just basic little things in Grounded that should really help you out in early, mid, or even late game.
That's interesting.
Shut up, Wendell. That was a little bit mean. But yeah, let's get started with it, alright guys? So first things first, you'll want to get water. Water is going to be a very essential thing in Grounded.
Prepare yourself! Large insect incoming!
What do you mean, Wendell? But yes, when you are in Grounded, you'll see that there are going to be little grass leaves that will have a dewdrop on them. Now, if you want to get it down, you can smack it. Just be careful where you do that it's not close to another water source. Otherwise, it is very likely that it may then go into the water source and you'll lose a source of water. But if it's in an area like this, you can smack it down and there you go. It'll just fall onto the ground and you can pick it up.
No lemon crime, but
It is a very good way to just get water in early game because as you can see, there's a bunch of dewdrops around here, especially from what I've noticed, more near the oak tree. There's a lot. So now let's move on to the second tip. So the second tip is going to be find mushrooms as a very, very basic starter and early game food. After that, I would suggest trying to go to aphids, weevils. They're very, very good because then those ones provide even more, I guess, sustenance for you. And they will just help out a lot more than just needing to come over to mushroom chunks and just pick up a bunch of mushrooms, you know? Now let's move on to the third tip. So the third tip is going to be you should definitely, within your first day, you should definitely look at building a lean-to. So let me just quickly find the recipe. Oh no, I think I lost it. Hold up, guys. I'm an idiot. But yeah, you should look at getting a lean-to. This lean-to will help you out a bunch in early game because at night you will barely be able to see anything, as you would have just seen in the first little part of my little video just now. Well, yeah. And it'll just, you know, speed through the night. The one disadvantage that does come with it is that your water and food bars will go down a significant amount. So definitely stay stocked up on water and food, and especially with water, as early as you can, try and get the canteen so then you can have water on you all the time without needing to go find it on grass. So now let's move on to the fourth tip. The fourth tip is that armor matters a bunch. You need to craft whatever armor is going to be the most basic in the first little bit for early game. So, my suggestion is to craft clover armor. But, if you are playing in woe mode, I would suggest grabbing the eye patch. It does bring your damage resistance down, but your attack up. Now, considering you're in woe mode, damage resistance going down just by a tiny bit, I think it's only 10%, is not really too much of a difference. Woe mode enemies in the first, like, when you're in tier 1 and 2, are definitely going to be super strong against you. So it doesn't really matter if you have less of a resistance against their attacks. So now let's move on to tip number 5. So tip number 5 is going to be you should scan everything that you get. Anything that you get that is a new piece of item. So for example, if you just got...
I could devour a billy hog right about now.
So for example, if you just got, for example, stem planks or grass planks and you're bringing them to the resource analyzer and you haven't researched them, do that instantly, because both of them will provide you with a bunch of building options that you wouldn't have had unlocked before. So my suggestion for the first 3 things that you should analyze is going to be a pebblet, plant fiber, and sap. You should analyze those 3 things first. Those are going to be very important, because as you can see, you only get 3 charges every, I'm pretty sure, 15 minutes, or 15, however long it may be. You only get 3 charges for a certain amount of time, so you'd want to use it sparingly. So let's get into tip number 6. So tip number 6 is going to be your inventory space. Now, with your inventory space, you'd only want to keep the essentials in there. So your weapon, your pickaxe or hammer, and maybe a shovel or whatever repair tool you may have. Anything in there that is going to be essential for what you are going to do. So only have the things that aren't going to be clutter in your inventory. Now let's move on to tip number 7. So tip number 7 is going to be that you should watch your hunger and thirst as much as possible, because running and jumping will burn more stamina and food, so you'd want to walk more to just conserve that, especially in early game when you don't have milk molars or little spare milk molars that you can use on reducing the speed that your food and thirst go down. So now let's move on to tip number 8. Tip number 8 is going to be that torches are key for a bunch of things, especially in early game. You're going to need at least 1, maybe 2 to 3 torches for certain instances. It depends how much you're using it up and how many times you're going into a very dark space. So you should really make torches for mainly when you're exploring caves or during nighttime. The slime mold torch is a really just cheap alternative method if you need to do something that will just, it won't last as long and it won't be as useful as just a regular torch, but it definitely will be useful, and you can use that one underwater as well. So now let's go on to tip 9. So moving on to tip 9, these are going to be your combat tips. So when you're fighting an enemy, always make sure that you are good at blocking their attacks. So blocking on PC, as you can see, will be your right mouse button. So you'd want to perfect block by timing it right. So if I just smack this ladybug real quick, you'll see I got hit because I didn't time the block right. But if you time it right, you'll hear that little sound, you'll see sparks come off your thing, and it will give them a little bit of a stun for, I think, a second or so, and it will help out in a lot of situations. So definitely when you're fighting an enemy, make sure that you block. Don't just keep swinging at the enemy unless you can kill the enemy quickly like I just did there. So now let's move on to tip number 10. Now, tip number 10 is going to be that when you're fighting an enemy, use their weaknesses to your advantage. You want to try your best to find or get a weapon that, for example, with the Broodmother, it has slashing and it has spicy. If you can find something like that, then use it against the Broodmother, because then that means that your damage will be multiplied even more compared to if you were using something like maybe the Mantis Scythe that has chopping and it has no extra effects. That will be a resistance, so you'll be dealing less damage than what it actually may be. So now, let's move on to tip number 11. Alright, so now for tip number 11. When you are fighting stronger enemies or enemies that are maybe a little bit too hard for you, try using a bow against them, because you'll be able to hit them from afar without them being able to attack you, and it'll be from a very safe distance. So it will help you out with dealing damage to them just very safely and very effectively as well, especially if your bow is up to a high level and if you're using really good arrows. So now let's move on to tip number 12. Now, on to tip number 12. You want to lure enemies to each other to get them to fight. If one enemy hits another, as you can see, they will start fighting each other. This is really, really useful if the enemy is a lot stronger than you and you need to just kill the enemy to even just get a couple of pieces from it. So when you're up in the upper yard, you could definitely just get a Black Ox Beetle to start fighting maybe 1, 2, maybe even 3 Ladybird larvas. Because then it can either kill the enemy for you or just whittle down their health by a very decent amount. So now, let's move on to tip number 13. So for tip number 13, what you want to do is when you're farming bugs, to farm them safely. So I don't have this set up, but when you want to farm bugs safely, use spike strips and also use the lure traps. So like when you're using a lure sort of thing and you're trying to farm the bugs, place the lure somewhere, but have spike strips around it, and maybe even layers and layers and layers of them. So then you can maybe be on the outside, but if it's getting a bit too much for you, you can retreat back in, heal up, and have the enemies just hurt themselves on the spike strips. So now let's move on to tip number 14. For tip number 14, when fighting bombardier beetles, you'll want to strafe to the side to try and avoid their acid spray. Now, it may not work all the time. Now, for this attack, I just got stuck on the rock. But what you'll want to do is just move out the way from that. But when they are doing that attack, you want to strafe to the side. So when they're doing that, either move backwards so then they can't hit you, or strafe more to the side. And then you should be able to just... I was able to kill them in 3 hits because I'm a little bit overpowered. But now, let's move on to tip number 15. Now, for tip number 15, what you want to do is to try and stun enemies. You want to do that with clubs or hammers, because those will give you more of a chance to then stun them, considering those have a higher chance. So, the Broodmother Club would work very well, but for me, considering my Broodmother Club is very powerful and just kills enemies super fast like that in 1 hit, I'm not able to stun them, so I won't be able to show you. But what you want to do is use things like a Broodmother Club, because you can see the stun is super high, and it will be able to then stun the enemy, and they won't be able to attack you. And you'll see that there will be like little, sort of a cartoon sort of spiral going around the top of their head, and their head normally goes facing to the ground, so that is how you will know, okay, they have been stunned, and that gives you more free hits. So now let's move on to tip number 16 in base building and safety. So for tip number 16, you want to build near water and resources. So for example, one of the really good spots would be the oak tree. So you can see I have built a massive base up there. Not 100% complete, but it's something. Now, building near the oak tree gives you very quick and easy access to acorns. So if I just quickly run around here, as you'll see, boom, there's an acorn shells, and a bunch of other acorns around the area. So it's a very quick and easy way to then get acorns. Another good spot is going to be little spots that are very big rocks. So areas sort of looking like this, but with more dirt in them and around them that spawn a bunch of pebblets. But it's also good because that gives you an extra elevated spot for higher ground safety. So then whenever enemies are attacking you, it makes them more difficult to get into or to you. And then the last one would be to build near juice boxes, because then that way you can build a little water container, and then you'll get a constant free source of water or juice. So now let's move on to tip number 17. So for tip 17, you'll want to elevate your base. So you could either do this by building on top of rocks or branches, anything that can really help you avoid bug attacks. As you can see, mine's a little bit excessive. I have built up at the oak tree, so really no enemies come up here because it's really impossible for them to aggro onto me. So this is a very, very safe base for me to work at and feel very safe at without having to worry about bugs coming up to me and bugging me. So now let's move on to tip number 18. For tip number 18, you want to defend against raids. So bugs will raid your base if they smell food or resources. So you'd want to use walls, traps, or even spiked strips. So then that way when they attack your base, it'll be more fortified and protected for when they do attack. And then you won't have to be doing 100% of the work when you have a raid. Now let's move on to tip number 19. For tip number 19, you want to use grass planks for floors or even walls. It's a very simple and easy resource to get, and it still provides very good protection, especially since it's just a quick little thing. Like, there's grass everywhere, and it's just a very strong resource in building in very early game. Now let's move on to tip 20. Now, moving on to tip 20, what you'll want to do is you'll want to build multiple doorways or even just extra little stairs to help you get out of the base in case it gets raided by enemies. So for me up here, I've built, zip lines. This is my little zipline hub as well. But I can use these as little getaways in case my base gets raided and it's too much for me to handle, so I just need to run away. Which brings us to tip 21 as well. On or in your base, you'll want to set up zip lines for quick travel across the map. So as you can see, I've set up one over to Moldor Castle.
Having a little peek.
For when I'm wanting to fight Director Smector. I've also set one up to the upper yard, one up to my base, my other base. I've set one up to the hedge. This one's set up to the haze. This one's set up to the picnic table. And this one was going to be set up to the little coal spot over there. So you really want to work on building a zipline system, as it will help you out a lot when you are making your way to another spot, and all you need to do is just press E.
This is awesome!
And now you can relax while you wait. As you can see, it will take longer when going up. That's just gravity. And going up, you will need to make sure that you have the zip R, otherwise you won't be able to go upwards. So, when making a zip line in early game, make sure that it's only really for single use going down to your location.
Everything looks good from here.
Now let's move on to tip 22. For tip 22, you'll want to use a workbench often. Some items cannot be crafted in your backpack, so you want to build a workbench as soon as possible. So, as you can see, when you go into your crafting thing, there will be things that will have this little bench or sort of table symbol. That's the workbench, so you'll want to build that, otherwise you won't be able to create all of these little things in here. So now let's move on to tip 23. So, for tip 23, what you'll want to do is to get a shovel so then you can easily find and get grubs. Considering grubs are going to be a very useful and needed resource, especially for getting canteens or even grub armor if you would like that. Anything that requires grubs, you can then use any of it for. So definitely look at getting a shovel as soon as possible, so then you can get the grub sludge and also then the grub hide. So now let's move on to tip 24. Tip 24 is going to be, whenever you see a dandelion, it's going to be tier 1, or it should be. So that will mean that when you find one, you can easily chop it down by using a tier 1 weapon. You will not have to worry about needing a higher...
I'm not.
But as you can see, dandelions do give you weed stems. So dandelions is a very, very quick and easy way to then get stems. So now let's move on to tip 25. Tip 25 is going to be whenever you have a piece of armor or a tool that is on a very low durability, always see if you can repair the tool instead of having to craft new ones. So most of the time, you can either repair it if you've reached endgame and your armor is above, if your armor is at bulky or sleek, so level 6, you then should be able to use repair glue on your tools and armor to then repair them instead of needing to use resources. You can also repair the tools in a workstation by using quartzite or whatever it may be. So as you can see, the armor is not at a very nice durability, still at level 7. I can do that, and now the armor is fully healed back up. So now, let's move on to tip 26. Always look at upgrading your weapons at the smithing station. Cause at the smithing station, when you're upgrading your weapons, as you'll see, the damage and durability goes up. So you'll get from 0 to 5 to 15 to 30, and it keeps going up and up and up. And then eventually, it'll get up to a massive amount of 165 or 190. And the max right now is 225, I'm pretty sure. Now, let's move on to tip 27. Tip 27 is going to be always check field stations to see if they have free bandages or granola bars. Anything that you can grab from a resource station, field station, will be useful. So just look around, have a look. Normally granola bars are here on the chair. Have a look even under. Just look everywhere. See if you can grab all the resources from field stations because they are very, very useful. Now let's move on to tip 28. Tip number 28 is going to be use trail markers. So you can use them to mark important locations like your base or even caves for resources. Anywhere that may need to be marked that you may forget later on, just always see if you can make a trail marker, and they cost so little. It's just 2 sprig, 2 fiber, and then 1 clover leaf. Very, very simple and easy to make. So now let's move on to tip 29. So for tip 29, you want to check juice boxes daily, as they will respawn with free water sometimes, very, very often. So now moving on to tip 30. Tip 30 is going to be go to ant hills, because at ant hills there will be a bunch of free loot inside, so like food, quartzite, random little things, maybe even milk molars. In ant hills there will be a bunch of different little resources inside, but make sure that you wear the corresponding ant armor, or even use the mutation ambassador if you have that, so then you don't get attacked by the soldier ants.
Let's see what's around here.
So So now let's move on to tip 31. So, for tip 31, you would want to climb the oak tree for science, as there's hidden raw science up like in the branches or even
I
on
could
some
devour a
of
Billy
the little
Hawk right
mushrooms
about now.
growing off the side. So there was one around here that I was able to pick up. But if you want to, you can definitely go ahead and climb the oak tree to find some. So now moving on to tip 33. Tip 33 is going to be that you should avoid fights with spiders early on until you have... Interesting. You should avoid fights with spiders early on until you have good gear, considering spiders early on in early game are going to be able to just shred you to pieces super easily, especially if you're new to Grounded as well and you don't know their attack patterns. You are going to be killed very fast. So now let's move on to tip 34. Tip 34 is going to be that orb weaver spiders are actually slower than wolf spiders. So you can use bows or rooftops to fight either of them safely. Just when you are fighting them, remember that wolf spiders have more speed compared to orb weavers. But wolf spiders do give you more rewarding things. Now onto tip 35. You should listen for their growls. So if it's a wolf spider, you'll hear heavy breathing. And if it's a orb weaver, you'll just hear the pitter-patter of their 8 legs. Now, moving on to tip 36, spiders will sleep during the day, and then they'll roam at night. So, this cycle can also be a little bit manipulated in a way. Sometimes I have had experiences where orb weavers are sleeping during the night and they're awake during the day. So it's a little bit interesting. I'm pretty sure most of the time orb weavers are supposed to be sleeping at night and the wolf spiders actually come out at night and then they're reversed during the day. Now tip 37 is that you should lure spiders into weaker bugs, because that way spiders will be a lot stronger than, for example, ladybugs or bombardier beetles, and you can just use them to then kill those other enemies to then harvest their stuff. Now, something I would like to add is when you are doing this, you won't get a bunch of resources because of the fact that something else has killed them. Just like if the enemy drowns, you will get nothing because of the fact that they drowned. Now tip 38 is that you should use gas arrows and bombs, since they will deal area damage or damage over seconds, so DPS. So that's really good against spiders, because just dealing damage just by hitting them a bunch is not really effective. So if you can have some DPS over the top, that really helps out. And then you can also continue doing what you're doing by hitting them with a spear, red ant club, whatever weapon you may have. Now let's move on to tip 39. Tip 39 is going to be that you should use aphid slippers for speed. This will increase your movement speed for much easier travel in a lot of different places and ways, because this gives you the quickness little effect and it helps out a lot. Now, tip 40 is that you should use smoothies, since they give buffs. So as you can see, Fuzz on the Rocks, that gives max health. Boss Sauce gives you critical hit chance. Liquid Rage gives you attack. You know, they all give you different effects and they all help out a bunch. Now, tip 41. Use the mutation system to your utmost advantage And if you want,
Everything looks good from here.
if you want, maybe leave a comment, like the video, I don't mind. Find some way to tell me if you want me to make a video on what the best mutations are, and maybe do a rank or a tier list, or what builds for mutations, anything on mutations. Tell me and I will make that video. Now, tip 42 is that ladybugs are walking tanks. Ladybugs are going to be absolutely powerful, especially in early game. So they can still
I'm not
be,
picky.
you know, like, you can still defeat them, but they will be a lot more beefier than for, let's say, I don't know, an Orb Weaver Jr. So you'd want to be very, very careful about picking your fights with ladybugs, because that fight will take longer
Meals on wheels.
and will probably increase your chances of being hurt. Now, on to tip 43. You can lure bugs away with food, since certain bugs are drawn to dropped food. So you can either use it to distract or even trap them, to maybe farm them, or do whatever you might need. Tip 44 is going to be that you should mix armor for hybrid builds. So as you will see, I have 3 completely different armors.
You can
That
be
is
smart,
my
fast,
build that I
lucky,
use
or
all the
just wear some
time.
armor.
So I have my Mask of the Mother Demon, my Fire Ant Arm Guards, and my Assassin's Greaves. This is more of a DPS build, considering the poison, corrosion, and bleed are going to be very strong in DPS, and DPS is a very, very strong thing in New Game Plus. Now moving on to tip 45. For tip 45, hidden boss fights do exist. So, for example, there are little bosses like the Broodmother, the Mantis, and even more. So, when you are fighting the assistant manager or other things, do keep in mind that there are other bosses for you to fight that you can keep spawning in and fight endlessly. Because as you can see, I have killed and fought 284 Broodmothers. Mainly for grinding purposes. I'm not a menace, I promise. But now moving on to tip 46. You should use a gas mask for stink bugs and the haze zone, because when you are using gas masks, it will make the damage just disappear. So you won't be getting hurt every second. So that way you will just be able to only worry about, so for example, if you're fighting a stink bug, you'll only have to worry about the attacks they are doing to you. Now, tip 47 is that you should harvest spiky burrs for spiky traps, because using spiky traps is going to be very, very useful for maybe you're building a little contraption, or maybe you're using it for that lure base sort of thing. Whatever you might be needing that includes that, keep collecting spiky burrs if you're using anything to do with traps. They're very, very useful. Now, tip 48, water fountains and droplets refill very slowly, so do not rely on them for unlimited hydration. So whenever you are looking to get a bunch of water, my suggestion, if you're in early game, go around to grass planks, have a dewdrop, and if you want to make it easier to find them, go into the hedge, go find the resource analyzer and activate it. Now, if you don't know where that is, I will quickly make a video after this one on where to find the resource analyzer, and I will, you can just check it out, or if you want, I will leave it in the description. Now for tip 49, build a zipline network. Like I said before, having a little spot like I have
Gonna
built
have a
over
look
near the
around.
great oak tree. You should build a zipline network so then when you are trying to get to many places, you can just hop straight on the zipline, go to your zipline hub, and then go wherever else you might need. Now tip 50, the very last tip, is going to be ant queens. So there's a couple of things with ant queens. First things first, infect the ant queens as soon as possible. You need to infect them. If you don't infect them, it's not going to work out well. Especially when you go into New Game Plus, because ant queens give you a special little item called the sausager, sausage links, and necklaces, and a bunch of other things that help you out to get more powerful in New Game Plus. So, what you want to do is look for their infected recipes, find them, create the infected version of what you need to feed them, and when you feed them, they will die, but when you go into next New Game Plus, that ant queen will then be infected, and you can feed them a moldy hoagie to then get the rewards, and you should also farm the infected ants because that ant queen will only be infected for that one round of New Game Plus. So then that means if you need to do it again, you have to go through 2 whole New Game Pluses to then get back to that stage. So yeah, that is all 50 tips in Grounded. I am very sorry that this video is super long, but it is going to help you out a lot in Grounded. So thank you for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please check out other videos on my channel, and please do subscribe. See you guys.